Hi, my name is Greener, and my goal is to complete World of Warcraft. So, what do I mean by completing World of Warcraft? Well, my goal is to catch up on the decades of WoW that I've missed because I started playing in patch 9.1. To do this, I'm attempting to go through each expansion in order by completing the Lore Master title requirements and collecting every mount from that expansion that I can possibly get. After that, I will move on to the next expansion. Well, this will definitely not encompass all of the content this game has to offer. I think it will provide an interesting glimpse into the rich history of this game. This goal is conceptually very simple, but actually completing it will be a huge challenge. My current plan is not to simply show clips of me getting mounts, although that will certainly be part of it. I intend for this to be more of a freeform series. For example, in this episode, I will be showing my current progress on the goal. I will show the mounts I've achieved and talk a bit about some of the outliers. I also plan to rate all of the zones I've completed so far. In future episodes, I may include mini guides on different content that I'm farming for mounts that I found challenging or hard to understand at first. So unfortunately, this goal is sort of developed over time, and I've already made some headway into it. Right now, I'm in the Cataclysm expansion, and I'm currently finishing the Eastern Kingdom quests. I decided to do these zones with Cataclysm instead of doing it as part of my classic journey, because I know they were revamped with Cataclysm. I finished Kalimdor Loremaster, and I'm roughly halfway done with the Eastern Kingdoms. Right now, I'm on simplearmory.com, which is an excellent resource that I would highly recommend using to help track your mount collection. As you can see, I have some mounts from the more recent expansions. While this goal is one of the primary things I do in the game, I do also actively play the current patch content. I mostly focus on PvE, but I have picked up a fair few of the Shadowlands and Dragonflight mounts along the way. Scrolling down, as you can see, I have obtained every possible mount from Classic, TBC, and Wrath. Classic mounts were a mixed bag for me. The Karachi Crystals are some of the easiest mounts to get in the game. Unfortunately, they can't be used outside of their instance, but if you're looking to inflate your mount count, I highly recommend going to pick these up. On the other hand, obtaining the Death Charger's Reins from Strat was possibly the most painful mount grind I've experienced so far. I didn't keep exact track, but I would estimate it took me about 400 to 500 runs through the dungeon for the mount to drop. So one quick tip I do have in regards to Stratholme and maybe other dungeons, I'm not entirely sure, I've only done it on this dungeon, is that if you're a lot of attempts in and you really want to do this as fast as possible, I would recommend having a druid that you can run it on. Right now I'm spec'd into Boomkin, but ideally I think you would do this on Feral to be as fast as possible. Not only do they have really quick movement speed, but they have this quick trick to go to the start of an instance that I will show you right now. So we're going to go into Stratholme. And I'm just going to use this as an example. I'm not going to run the whole dungeon, because I would like to never see this dungeon again. But pretending that I've finished the dungeon and I'm done with my farm, normally you would have to run all the way from here back to here and leave, reset, and enter. What you can do instead of that is you can use your Dreamwalk ability to teleport to the Emerald Dream. And the cool thing about this ability is that you can just press it again and it'll take you right outside the instance. So while I initially farmed this on my mage, eventually I got tired of it, tired of running out, and I decided to finish it on my druid. And as you can see, it makes getting out a lot easier. It just takes about 20 seconds of teleporting to get right back to the start of the instance, and then all you have to do is reset your instance. I hope this helps. TBC had many more mounts than Classic, but honestly, getting them wasn't that much more difficult. The Cenarian Expedition, Maghar, Netherwing, and Shatari Skyguard mounts are all fairly short, 10 hours or less reputation grants. I would highly recommend doing as many of them as you can when TBC Timewalking is up, as that event significantly increases rep gain. Unfortunately, the event doesn't come around that often, but if you do see it, be sure to take advantage. All of the TBC vendor mounts shown are 100 gold or less and can be bought near the Flightmaster and Orgrimmar as shown, or in Stormwind if you are Alliance. They have no requirements, so be sure to pick these up for some very easy mounts to add to your collection. The 2 dungeon mounts were fairly standard dungeon mount farms. Since the content is so old, both the Reins of the Ravenlord from Sethic Halls and the Swift White Hawk Strider from Magister's Terrace can be repetitively cleared by pretty much any max level character. Speaking of the Magister's Terrace, I was a little disappointed that the Isle of Quel'Danas, where it is located, wasn't a part of Loremaster, so I honestly did not interact with the zone at all in my journey, besides traveling to the dungeon. That's a shame, because the zone was apparently important patch content in its time, and contained a raid I learned almost nothing about. As far as raid mounts go, TBC only had 2 mounts, and thankfully both aren't too bad to farm. The Fiery Warhorse's Reins drop from the very first boss in the old Karazhan raid. Going through the instance and killing the boss takes less than a minute per attempt. This was also a mount I got very lucky on. My rarity numbers are pretty messed up from constantly revamping my UI, but this took me less than 10 attempts. The other TBC raid boss drop is the coveted Ashes of Arlar. Unfortunately, this one took me around 150 attempts, but for a raid mount, this one also wasn't too bad to farm. You can run directly to the end boss that drops it, and the instance isn't that large, so you get there pretty quick. Kael'thas does have some annoying RP that makes him take a couple minutes to kill, but it is still much quicker to clear than a typical raid instance. Wrath of the Lich King is the last expansion I've finished. It is the first expansion where mounts really start coming from varied sources. It introduced the achievement mounts as rewards for completing various challenges inside the dungeons and raids of the expansion. Most of these achievements are pretty easy to do in modern WoW, but some either require or benefit from having a friend help. They also don't take very long to do. It shouldn't take more than a couple instance resets to do them all. This expansion also has 2 quest mounts. The first mount is the Reins of the White Polar Bear. This mount is a reward from the daily quest in the Storm Peak zone. You unlock the dailies while questing through the zone, and none of them are particularly difficult to do, so this is a pretty easy mount to get. Unfortunately, as it comes from dailies, it's time-gated, so while the actual time spent in-game getting the mount is pretty low, it can take weeks or months of dailies to get. The second quest mount is the Reins of the Crimson Death Charger. I'll be honest, I cheesed this mount. This mount drops as part of a very long ICC questline to make Shadowmourne. I'm a mage, and doing a months-long quest to make a melee weapon didn't really interest me. I had already achieved Invincible from the raid before I looked up how to get this mount, so there wasn't any real reason for me to want to do more ICC runs. I bought this from the auction house instead. In retrospect, this was a mistake, and I definitely missed out on a cool experience because I hadn't done my research. Just like in TBC, Wrath has some pretty easy to get vendor mounts. All mounts are sold by May Francis in Dalaran. These are a bit more expensive than their predecessors, ranging from 750 gold up to 20,000 gold. One of the largest sources of mounts in Wrath comes from the Argent Tournament. This area is patch content, much like Quel'Danas was in TBC, but unlike Quel'Danas, this drops a ton of mounts, so I actually got to experience it. Unfortunately, the Argent Tournament is a long grind, and achieving all of the mounts takes months of very repetitive dailies and reputation grinds for different races. There is a way to make it less time-gated by spamming the dungeon there, but I didn't really find that enjoyable, and I stuck to the dailies. It's also very convoluted at the start. Even the Wowhead guide for the tournament has trouble explaining it in a digestible way. It does drop 14 mounts though, so it provides a hefty addition to any mount collector's portfolio. As far as reputation mounts go, Wrath has far fewer than TBC. There are 2 mammoths sold by the Sons of Hodir faction. This rep grind is super easy, especially during Wrath Timewalking. Wowhead has an article on how to get them quick during the event, so be sure to dig that up if you ever notice that Wrath Timewalking is up. The Reins of the Red Drake mount can be purchased when you reach Exalted with the Wormrest Accord. This is also a super easy rep grind, and you can purchase a Tabard for that faction and farm mobs in Wrath dungeons like the Pit of Sauron over and over to get the rep fast. The final rep mount is the Reins of the Green Proto Drake. This was painful to get. It requires doing dailies with the Oracles in Shalazar Basin until you hit Revered. This part takes a bit, but isn't too bad. Unlike the other rep mounts though, you can't simply purchase this one and add it to your collection. Instead, you have to buy the cracked egg item from a vendor and wait 3 days for it to hatch. It is by no means guaranteed to get them out when it hatches. You usually get battle pets or other junk. If you don't get them out, you have to travel back and buy another egg and wait 3 days again and again. The rarity count in my screenshot is wrong again, but it took me around 5 to 6 months of opening this egg every 3 days to get it. This was actually the last mount I had needed to complete Wrath. Wrath has 2 dungeon mounts. The first is the Bronze Drake that is a guaranteed drop from a mob in the Culling of Stratholme instance. There are plenty of guides on YouTube for this, and if you're looking for a quick mount to grab, this is a solid choice. The other dungeon mount is the Blue Proto Drake, which comes from Heroic Utgard Pinnacle. You get 1 attempt per day per character, so this one took me a while to get. Farming the instance itself isn't too bad though. You can just zoom all the way to the 3rd boss that drops them out and ignore the other bosses. This expansion also has a decent amount of raid mount drops. The first 2 are the Black Drake and the Twilight Drake, which drop from 10 and 25 man Obsidian Sanctum respectively. They are 100% drops from killing the only raid boss, Sartharion, with all 3 mini drakes up. This should be very easy for any max level character. You simply run up to the boss and one-hit it. The next pair of mounts are the Azure Drake and Blue Drake, which both drop from killing Malygos in the Eye of Eternity on any size. They aren't 100% drops, but anecdotally they seem pretty common. I got my first one fairly quickly, and the second one dropped a couple kills later, along with a dupe of the first one. This instance is also a very fast one to farm, only taking a couple of minutes per attempt. The Onyxian Drake is another raid mount that comes from killing Onyxia in her lair. This is another one boss instance, and is a very quick one to run through. I got pretty lucky on this. Yet another easy boss drop comes in the form of the Grand Black War Mammoth from any of the bosses in the Vault of Archivon. This is a small instance that has 4 bosses, and the drop rate seems to be very common. I got it on my first run. The only difficult part of this farm is that the raid is located in a PvP zone, and your faction has to control the area for you to have access to the raid. Keep an eye out as you adventure in Northrend so that you can go grab this when you control the area. The final 2 raid mount drops are by far the most difficult. The first is Memoron's Head, which is a 1% drop from completing Ulduar with no help from the Watchers. This is very easy in Modern WoW, but Ulduar is a massive raid that takes a fair amount of time to farm, even with experience. This combined with the low drop rate makes for a pretty difficult to obtain mount. One very quick tip about this mount, which saves a ton of headache if you have multiple characters farming it weekly, is that you can actually use the lockout of one character on all of your other characters to make it so that you only need to clear the full raid once. Every other character only needs to kill the last boss. I made a quick mini guide to demonstrate this. Okay, so I'm on my mage right now, which has cleared all of Ulduar up to Yogg, and now I'm going to share my lockout with an alt account. And this is kind of a convoluted process, so bear with me here. Once you do it a couple times, it becomes pretty easy. But all you have to do, start a legacy raid group, pick whatever raid you want, title it whatever you want, list the group, and then you're going to log out and go to an alt that you have that is in front of the entrance. So I'm on my ult now, and I'm going to look for the group that I listed on my main and sign up for it. And then I'm going to log back out. And I'll load back into my main now. And I'm just going to quickly accept my ult into the group. You want your main to be in a city where you can log out instantly. You don't want to have to wait 20 seconds to log out. So I'm just going to quickly invite my ult, log back out right away, and get back on my ult. And now my ult's going to be in the group. Or I might have to accept the invitation. Okay, now I'm in the group on my ult. And all I do is I just go into the raid. Don't have to worry about anything. You can just run straight in once you're in the group. And we're going to go, specifically in this raid, in Ulduar, we're going to go right to the teleporter. And conveniently, there will be the bottom teleportation option that takes us right in front of Yogg. And you can do this as many times as you want on as many ults as you want. As long as you don't kill the boss on your main, you can keep repeating it. The final raid mount is the legendary Invincible, which drops after killing the Lich King in Icecrown Citadel. It only drops from the 25-man heroic instance, so be sure to double check your instance settings before entering. This is also a 1% or less drop chance, and ICC is an incredibly large raid, so grinding this one out can take many months. I recommend reading the comments in the Wowhead article for this mount. There's a very detailed guide on how to farm it more efficiently. I haven't tested this because I got the drop before I found out about this method, but it should work as it is very similar to the Ulduar method. The Last Wrathma mount is the first rare spawn mount introduced into the game. The time-lost Proto Drake is a mount that can be incredibly time-consuming and frustrating to get. It is a guaranteed drop from a mob of the same name that has a very long spawn rate and can spawn in one of a couple locations. It takes many people weeks of spending days AFKing to get this mount. I, however, got incredibly lucky. One time, while I was flying from Dalaran to the daily hub for the polar bear, I spotted the mob in the corner of my eyes, just flying around. Honestly, I initially flew past it because I didn't realize what I had seen, and once it hit me, I turned around and beelined for that mob, and I somehow got it. This is one of my favorite memories in WoW. I saved weeks of my time by getting extraordinarily lucky. So that about wraps up the first episode of Completing WoW. I'm sorry this was basically a catch-up episode and I couldn't really show the beginning of the journey from scratch. This idea kind of developed over time, and the idea of chronicling it developed even later. My rough plan for the next couple episodes of this series is to finish the Eastern Kingdom's Lore Master achievement in the next episode, and then I will make a tier list of all the zones I've done so far. In the third episode, I'll show my Cataclysm mount progress and make a full plan for completing the expansion so I don't repeat the Crimson Death Charger incident. I appreciate anyone who watched this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.